Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. People, look. Earl Spence versus Terrence Crawford. I wasn't optimistic it was going to happen. I did a video and told y'all don't expect to see the fight happen. Keith Thurman's going to slide in there. Now, I still feel there's an opportunity for Keith Thurman to get in there. Okay, so I don't think we're out of the mud yet, but I pay attention to Earl Spence when he talks. When Earl Spence was talking about Terrence Crawford before, or even talking about Keith Thurman, or talking about fighting Canelo, or any fighter, right? If it doesn't look like a fight's going to happen, Earl Spence is very vocal and finger pointing-ish and saying, hey, don't blame me, blame that guy. Or saying, hey, when I tried to make the fight, they didn't want it. Now I'm the big fish. They can kiss my butt. And when he spoke about Terrence Crawford, before, it was like, I get the lion's share. Terrence Crawford will never get this fight off the ground. Until he comes to reality with his demands and expectations on the purse split. But it's got real quiet since Earl Spence defeated Ugas. And Terrence Crawford has been super quiet. Even his camp, you get little rumblings, but no one, if you notice, has been vocal like they've been in the past. All of a sudden, everyone's mouth is sealed. The whole team is reticent. That tells me there's something bubbling. Now, I wouldn't get excited yet, but I think something's bubbling. Because Earl Spence doesn't talk about Al Haymon too much. All he says is, talk to Al, talk to Al. Well, when Earl Spence comes out during an interview, when he's getting pressed about an undisputed fight between he and Crawford at welterweight, before Earl Spence would just say, maybe the fight can't happen. Yeah, I don't know. Got to talk to him, or he'll blow off the question. He has a way of dealing with the media. But this past weekend, Earl Spence, he knows what to say, what not to say. Okay? And if there's nothing bubbling in regards to negotiations between Spence and Crawford, Earl Spence would have never said, it's just talking stages right now. Now, when he says it's just talking stages, that means that someone from Crawford's team, someone from Spence's team are trying to sort out some details. Okay? So that's the first thing where I think we can kind of really start to build a little anticipation for the fight happening this year. Okay? So when he said that, I said, okay, hold on. The purse split was an issue. Sounds like they're having a discussion. Okay? They can get beyond the purse split. Like that's what I'm thinking, because that was one of two huge problem areas. One of two huge problem areas. There's three, but the two big ones, to me, was that purse split. So for Earl Spence to come out and say, we're in the talking stages right now, in my opinion, they're resolving that purse split. So that's the one thing that I'm going to assume, because just for them to talk, that means that the purse split, that's the biggest issue. They're figuring all that out. Purse split, pay-per-view, everything. Now, I'm assuming now, but to me, we can't talk if we can't figure out the money issue. So I think that's the first business at hand, sort out the money. Then he goes on to say, right, that Al Haymon told me, all right, Earl Spence said Al Haymon told him that he wants to fight. Now, people, not sure you know, I'm not sure you understand the significance of that statement. Okay? Earl Spencer's always saying, talk to Al, talk to Al. Well, it was a conversation with Al, and obviously, matter of fact, let me rephrase that. Well, there was a conversation that it was initiated by Al saying he wanted to fight. So that tells me, one, the biggest issue to me was the purse split and the pay-per-view sales and all of that. Seems like the whole overall, when it comes to revenue, they're working through that. They're having discussions. The second biggest sticking point was Al Haymon and not wanting to lose all those belts if Spence was to lose, right? Because then he has no control. His whole state is all the welterweights in the stable. There's nothing there. No one cares about an interim this, a silver this, a continental this. No. He wants all those belts. That's your resume. That's your leverage. That's your leverage. Okay? But for him to say Al wants it, that tells me that Al is now trying to figure out how to make the fight. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm extremely confident that Al is working out some deal with Terrence Crawford to make sure Crawford is handsomely compensated for a multi-fight deal that would have him commit to Al Haymon and PBC, get at least 2 fights, the first fight and a rematch, potentially 3, depending on if Spence wins the first one, then they have a rematch, Crawford wins the second, and they have a trilogy. So potentially a 2 to 3 fight deal. And then after that, Crawford is free to do what he wants. But in those 3 fights, Crawford will make an exceptional amount of money. And, Spence too. And I don't know what the purse split is going to be, but I'm going to think it's going to be more to get the fight done. 70-30 to me, 80-20 to me is fair. But if we want to try to get the fight done, I'm thinking a 70-30, because Spence does have 3 belts. But 65-35, that's fair. 60-40 is just not fair. Okay, Crawford, he brings 1 belt to the table. But 65-35, especially seeing that Spence really wants to unify. Crawford wants to unify, but he got frustrated in the past and has said he doesn't care about becoming undisputed at welterweight. He's been undisputed before. That's Earl Spence's passion. So when you have somebody like that and they know that this is your passion and this is what you want, they can kind of use that to their advantage in negotiation because they don't want you to go away with that 1 belt. Spence doesn't want Crawford to go away with that 1 belt. He wants it. So he's like, okay, instead of a 70-30 split, I'll give up another 5% to that man if that's what it'll take to get this deal across the table. Now, this is just me sitting here kind of brainstorming and just trying to, going off of how negotiations have gone historically with other champions. Sometimes, you gotta give more than what you want when you're looking at the return on that investment. And I honestly think that 65-35 purse split is what it's going to be. Now, at some point, if they are going to move forward this year, we're going to find out. And I'll come back to this video. But I think 65-35 should keep them both feeling okay. Crawford shouldn't feel like he's just being strong-armed into a horrible financial space. Spence shouldn't feel like he's having his eyeballs sucked out. Okay? So I think that's the sweet spot. So the first 2 things was the 1, financial split. 2, hey, if Crawford's not with Al Haymon, Al Haymon's not going to make that fight. Al Haymon says he wants to fight now. Sure, he's going to figure out a way to make sure Crawford gets what he wants, but at the same time, they get what they want to have him sign the PBC so all those belts stay within that organization. The third thing, which was a sticking point, in my opinion, was Crawford's inactivity. Could Crawford just want to jump into a fight with Spence? Well, check this out. Crawford went on record and said he doesn't want to warm up. He wants to go right into the undisputed fight. So that fight with Thurman, as of right now, I think it's like a 50-50 chance that fight happening. But it's 50-50 chance this happens with Spence because talks are ongoing. And I have I'm out here in Texas, right? And I have a buddy of mine, Lil Birdie, kind of flew in to one of my conversations and was like, hey, look, I'm out here with these guys, the Spence camp. And I'm like, yeah, all right. And he's like, that fight's going to happen, right? And I'm like, okay. I said, yeah, we'll see. And now that I see what's starting to kind of bubble a little bit, I'm starting to believe that it's gaining some steam. And that's why things have gone, kind of really quiet. Because there's stuff going on. Quiet before the storm. The storm is about to hit us. And it's going to be a storm where we're going to enjoy riding that storm out. Because these two look like they're going to get it going the end of the year. And when you have the fact that Crawford's not worried about his inactivity, Al Haymon coming out saying, I want that fight. And then you have Earl Spence coming into the forefront in the media, making a statement like, it's just talking stages right now. That means that there's something going on. Now, I personally think if that fight was to take place, May, June, July, August, September, November timeframe is when that fight's going to pop off. I'm going to say September 2022. That fight's going to happen. 65-35 per split in Earl's favor. Crawford's going to sign to Al Haymon for 3 to 5 fight deal, but in particular maybe 3. The fight, rematch, and depending on who wins, go into a trilogy. And Crawford's going to make huge money. More money in the first 2 fights that he probably made in his whole 10 years over there with Top Rank. I'm willing to say that. Because this is a huge fight, people. I was really looking at pay-per-view sales and looking at the amount of attention that this fight's getting. And I really do think this is a big money fight. And when you think about what Canelo, you look at what's going on right now, right? Canelo's the real draw. But with Canelo kind of trying to figure out what he's going to do next and taking a loss, and Crawford kind of, and a lot of people's pound for pound list is bubble to the top. So, and in Earl Spence, he's right there. What a storyline for these two guys. Bud Crawford, knucklehead, shot in the head, survived, turned his life around, became all about the community boxing, has a healthy relationship with his wife, beautiful athletic children. Earl Spence, we all know the story. You know, car accident, coming back from that. Started boxing at 16 or something. Dad met Derek James at a match because all Earl was doing was the 1-2. Took him to the gym. Earl started beating up the sparring partners that were beating up him. Made it to the Olympics, turned pro. Got busy with Mayweather. Names start bubbling up. And look at where we are now. Okay, and then the car accident, eye issue. Look where we are now. This is the type of storyline that you need to get the international community, but especially here in America, to buy into it. This is going to be all over billboards, going to be all over commercials, going to be huge sponsorship deals. These two guys, I didn't think it would make that much money at first, but looking at what happened here with Canelo, this is the perfect time for these guys to come and figure out what they're going to do. Pinpointing a good date for the fight is extremely important because Canelo's going to be coming back this year doing something. But I think these guys will overshadow anything Canelo's doing at this point. I really do. Canelo's still a huge draw. He's not going anywhere. But I think this fight overshadows any fight out there right now. Deontay Wilder, AJ, if that was to happen this year for some reason, it's not even that big. Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, a 4th fight, that's not big. There's no other fight out there right now. Yeah, there's no really, yeah. This is it. This is the fight to make. This is the fight. And it looks like we're going to get it. So I would say, like I said in another video, if they can give Canelo $55 million to fight a PBC fighter for one fight, you know, they can figure out to take $55 million and split it between Spence and Crawford. So I definitely think these two are looking at a $20-25 million. I think there'd be at least $50 million on the table to be split in a 65-35 agreement, with 65 going to Spence. And then the rematch, depending on who wins, it'll probably be the same thing, but going to the victor. So I think these guys are about to get life. They're already well off, life-changing money for just their first 2, potentially 3 fights. And this is what you want to see happen, and I'll be glad for these guys. But at the same time, man, you know, don't be surprised if Keith Thurman slips in there. Don't be surprised if one time comes out here and ruins that dream for you. Because one time could definitely do it. All it takes is one fool on either one of their teams to be stubborn and derail the negotiations and you know, just kill the momentum that this fight is gaining, man. So that's my 2 cents on it. Got to listen when these guys talk. Terrence Crawford's not saying anything. That's because there's negotiations going on. And Earl Spence had an opportunity to duck that question, but he chose to speak on it. And he said, we're in the talking stages right now. That tells me there's something going on. And it's kind of like the Pacquiao-Mayweather thing. They have reached an agreement, and they chose to sit on it for a while until whoever decided that, hey, we're going to go and make the announcement. But we're all sitting here not knowing if the fight's going to happen. They had already agreed on it. Signed papers, everything was a done deal. And then, boom, they announced it. And everyone's like, oh, wow. And then you come to find out what they had already agreed on. They just chose to remain reticent on the issue. No need to go out there and announce it yet. Let's just sit on it and wait. So I think it may be the same thing here. They're going to sit there. They're going to have the agreement in place. They're going to wait for a huge event, pay-per-view event, or a big fight. And that's when you're going to see the advertisements and the announcement being made. And then the whole world, I think, is going to go crazy. And I think this is the optimal time for them to have that fight, and definitely within the next 30 days make an announcement. But then again, everything I'm saying could be all crap. You know what I'm saying? But I do feel that something will happen sooner than later, because the reality of the situation is this. Terrence Crawford can't afford to go the rest of this year without fighting. If for some reason they hit a sticking point, right, which I don't think they're going to, because Al Haymon's involved. Al Haymon makes things happen. If they hit a sticking point, Crawford has to fight somebody. And who's there for him to fight? Okay? So we got to figure that out. But right now, it looks like it's gaining some steam. And I believe it's probably happening around September. We get an announcement in 30 days, fight in September. If not, who knows? So that's just me kind of trying to envision how negotiations have gone in the past with different fighters, the kind of gamesmanship on both ends, and who's involved. And in this situation, I always talk about the guy at the control center. It's Al Haymon, and he's a micromanager. He's not going to let anybody come in here. If this is what he wants, he's going to make sure it happens. And the same way he makes sure his guys are happily compensated when he takes that 10 or 15% to be their manager and promoter, he's going to make sure Terrence Crawford is happy, because he's a fighter and he cares about the fighters. And he's going to understand his concerns. He's going to make sure he takes care of them. He's going to make sure that fight happens. And he's going to make sure his PBC is taken care of as well. And I'm excited to kind of get that warm fuzzy about it. So thank you, Earl Spence. And for you guys out there who didn't catch what he said, and, you know, I'm bringing that to you for the first time, you're welcome. Anyway, that being said, y'all keep cool. More to come on this, but I have a feeling it's going to pop off, man, later this year. Get an announcement within 30 days, because they've been talking for a while. So they're probably, 75% into the deal. So we'll see what happens. But as always, y'all keep cool. I appreciate the support. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. And as always, I'm in the breeze.